Okay, yeah, I'll do my best to stretch. I only created 4 slides, but that's okay. There's a lot of other, there's you know, we can look at this as kind of a discussion anyway. So, and one of the slides is just the title. So Bill might actually be familiar with where, this is an open source project that I worked on, and it spawned from a project that Bill might be familiar with, building a e-commerce front end and managing the cart of that front end. It's a pretty common problem in the front end that you have some kind of stateful entity on the back end that you need to update, something like a cart. You need to add things to the cart, remove things from the cart, increment items in the cart, change their modifiers, that kind of thing. And what you want often in terms of the interface are methods that you can call that change the state, right? So like, here's a very simple example of what that might look like. I have a little add method that I can pass arguments to. I'm going to add 2 to some count state. And when I do that, it's going to make a request to the server. While that request to the server is being made, I want to show a little loader. If something, an error happens, I want to show an error. Pretty common pattern. There's things that can take your fetch requests like SWR and make methods to handle asynchronous pretty easily. But when you have kind of like a centralized entity that you want to make state changes to, you're often left to use something like UserReducer, especially, and we'll talk about it, how this thing can do queuing. If you want to like have someone be able to like edit the cart, add one product to it, and then quickly delete another product, and you want to make sure the requests for those things don't run over each other, this little library that we made can do that pretty easily. So I'm going to show what that looks like, and I'm going to compare it to what you'd have to do with a normal reducer pattern, and then show what it looks like to do this kind of thing with the SimpleReducer library. Any questions right there? I don't know if the context I was providing made sense to folks. Might make sense when we see the example. And maybe for the new people, you get a glimpse of what it looks like to use UserReducer. So this is an oversimplified use case for right now, where I simply would just want that add method, and I want it to change a count. And if there's a failure, I want to be able to have that failure state available to my JSX. So here, again, it's the same thing we looked at. I have an add method, and when someone clicks that, I want to add whatever is passed in here. I want to show the current state, show some spinner, and then show an error state. Like there's easier ways of doing exactly this, but we'll build up the example, and it's good to understand how UserReducer works. So I'm not going to go like crazy detail on how UserReducer works, but the basic premise of UserReducer is that you get your current state and you get some type of action, some type of event that you reduce to your new state that you want available to your UI, to like your view layer, basically. And then when you call UserReducer, it gives you your current state, and it gives you a dispatch method that you can call with your actions that this responds to essentially by driving a new state. So for instance, what add does, and if you want it to handle asynchronous behaviors, add, when you first call add, it's going to dispatch like a loading event, which the reducer will say, oh, is active, mean are you pending, are you spinning, like are you currently processing something on the server? It'll set that to true. and then it'll make the request to the server. And then when the server is done, you'll dispatch a new event to signify what's happened, either add success or add failure. And you'll say, oh, here's the new amount, here's the amount of steps you've taken or what you've added, and then here's your error. And the reducer essentially looks at those events and takes the previous state and updates to a new state. So if it was a success, we're going to update the count, set active back to false because we're no longer doing something on the server. And if there's a failure, we're going to set is active to false as well, and then give whatever the failure was. Any questions, especially for those folks who are maybe new to React or UserReducer?
I am following. I get it. So I am there.
Cool. So now let's take a look at what it looks like for the SimpleReducer, because the idea behind SimpleReducers, the goal is really to make these add functions super easy to implement, and not really have to do the reducing. It's expected that as we'll see, with SimpleReduce, you're just returning your new state every time, and that's a pretty common pattern where the add method does some asynchronous behavior and then returns the new state of whatever data record it's operating on. So you would use SimpleReducer, pass it whatever initial state that you wanted, maybe our count is 0, and then this gets passed the current state. It can take whatever arguments you want. The one thing that it does kind of cool here is it shifts the argument. So whatever argument is passed here, it shifts the argument to the second argument because the first argument is the state. You do whatever asynchronous behavior you have to do, and then you return your new state. And all these methods are async methods, so they're expected to return promises essentially, but that means you can use await and other things inside here. And then UseSimpleReducer provides you your error and your action methods and your current state that you can use down here. So instead of count, you have state.count. Any method that you put in here becomes action.method. You have a queue, which we'll talk about, which lets you know if things are running and what things are running. Is active, lets you know if like the queue is running. And error just gives you, if there is an error, it gives you whatever basically whatever these methods were rejected with, the promise that they return is rejected with, that's going to be the reason here on the error. Any questions about how this works, or?
Yeah, 2 questions. If there is an error when you call add, will state remain unchanged?
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good question about so error handling and the queue. So state will remain unchanged, and you will be given this is actually kind of like the slide here. The error object will have it's got pretty good error handling. Maybe it's easier. I don't know how easy it is for people to read my screen right here. I'll just go to the docs. It's kind of easier to maybe read. The error will have the reason. It'll have whatever the action is. The failed action will have like the name of the method you called, like add, and it will have whatever arguments were passed. Any pending action. So we'll see this in the demo, but if I click, like if someone's clicking really fast, you can see it's queuing up different methods. If there was a failure that happened while there were still things queued to be run, it will give you that array of pending actions. And then there's like methods that you can do to decide like, well, do I want to rerun the pending actions or rerun the failed action? Can I skip it? Or do I want to just try everything again? Or do I just, there's also a way, if you don't run any of these, the default behavior is the queue is cleared, ready for the next click. It's not going to try any of those things that the user has done previously. So it does handle, like, it is designed through its queuing system to allow like the user to click around and then provide a relatively easy, maybe not the most optimal user experience, but like an easy to program user experience that handles queuing, so that people can click, add this to the cart, then remove this from the cart, add this to the cart, remove this cart. They can click that quick. And if one fails, the state is left like as the state of the server understands it. And you can ask the user, do you still want to do all these other actions? Do you still want us to try deleting this other one that you might have deleted that's in the queue?
That's very cool default behavior. That sounds like a really nice design choice.
Yeah, there's this, if we're getting into the weeds of discussion weeds, there's other libraries and things like that, or patterns that make it so that the user sees the effect of their state immediately. So you would click add and immediately make the cart look like you had added something. This is not made for that. This is made so you would see a spinner, and once the server has actually done it, your cart would look updated. It does allow people to make multiple actions, but it runs them serially. And that's a nice compromise. The state of the art in terms of user experience, if like how Google's websites will work, is like you can just create actions, and if there is a failure, it will like kind of revert the client back to the state where the error happened and kind of undo any changes they have made. It kind of makes the assumption that things are going to work 99% of the time, which is maybe a fair assumption. I think that's a funkier programming model. So if you want something like that, this does not do that. It kind of is the easier version where you just like only show the user what's actually been committed by the server. So there's no like abrupt rollback in this model. But it'll feel a little maybe slower to the user, but it still allows them to do things. I don't know. It's a UX person. I'm not a UX expert. It was deemed acceptable enough for this site that I was working on.
Cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail the whole conversation.
No, I think that I mean, if I'm interpreting Bill correctly, I think that's okay, since I'm the only talk. But that's a really good question. So let's look at the. Oh, yeah, I showed off what this one looks like now. So yeah, you would just normally add a bunch of different methods here. Add item to cart, update number of item, like this product in the cart, change its modifiers, things like that. And then I've got a demo that I was already showing somewhere in one of these links. There it is. And this is the same thing, just now with an add and a subtract. And this just kind of shows like, oh, you can take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I can click this a bunch of times here and this one a bunch of times. And you can kind of see it like chunky, doing one, it takes about each one takes about a second. And then when it's all done, the steps will be complete. And the cool thing about at least, this is that you can expose if you really had to in the UI, if it was like something you really want to show the person, okay, we're working on doing all these things that you committed, it provides that queue, wherever it is in here, these pending actions and whatever the current action is, that you can loop through, and whatever method and arguments, you can present that to the user somehow. So this is just putting the action name out there, looping through the pending actions and putting each one's action, each name, which is just going to be add or subtract. But then you can see the subtracts and adds down here. So especially if this was maybe something, oh, go ahead.
One more question about this is like, within the add method, if you wanted to do something like set a loading state and then perform your async action and then return the new state, basically make 2 state updates. Is there a way to do that?
Well, it does. So that it actually is doing that. That's the default behavior. So that whenever one of these functions is run, that's that queue, where did it go? It's in the docs. I don't know. Oh, queue is active. So when I'm clicking here, you see this little spinner? That little, that's a spinner. So you can just look at the queue is active and you can put whatever spinner you want there. So it just assumes asynchronous state mechanics and always puts in a spinner. Or it doesn't, you have to put in the spinner. It provides this queue is active state that you can use in your template, in your JSX to show a spinner if you choose. Got it. Cool. Yeah, so this is, again, we built this because this is like a very common case, like that is kind of onerous to make work if you're doing it through UserReducer. Okay, so that's the demo. Yeah, the other features, I kind of showed the docs. I think it's got relatively good docs to hit all the APIs, and there's this demo, so not bad for like a fledgling open source micro project. The TypeScript stuff is really good, and if that's something that people want to talk about, I would like. So the TypeScript implementation is really nice because you don't actually have to provide these interfaces. It can infer all of that. Similar if you're using if you're used to using TypeScript and JSX, TypeScript and React's hooks themselves, it kind of knows what it can, based on the arguments that you pass to those things and if you're passing the function, it knows what the results need to look like. We did all of that work, and it's a lot of TypeScript work to make something that like shifts arguments. You know, I talked about how the add action. I talked about how the add action here just takes a number here. And this async, it's a second argument to make it so that you don't have to do, like this works. If you pass this a string here, it's going to freak out because your amount is not a number, and shift the arguments like that is some pretty, at least for me, funky TypeScript. And you can see like of the implementation, 70 lines is like almost TypeScript, and the other 170 lines is actually like React state mechanics. So half of the implementation is getting like the TypeScript side of things to work correctly, and these kind of funky helper types in TypeScript, which that might be a talk, but maybe not for this, not for the React meetup, but a talk in of itself, how to make things like that work. But that's definitely a feature. Pretty proud of how good its TypeScript inferencing is. I talked about the queuing and talked about the error handling. So that's basically it. Any other questions?
You guys using this in production?
Yeah. Well, so the project, maybe Bill, you know about the Yum store. So that's used there. So that's like, it's the e-commerce platform that I was working on. They built there was a platform as a service. So they built the service layer that other companies or other entities build their front ends on top of. This is used by that platform to prove out that the actual service layer is working, which is, you know, it's tested now. It's just no actual users are using it today. And I don't know if they will, because of this, the weird quirks of like how this product that it was built for is used. One of those downstream entities that's building their site, I'm trying to get them to use this, but they've already built their cart mechanic a year ago. So swapping to this would be a big lift for them and not really where their priorities are. But at Bitovi, you know, we're starting to look to use this other places as well. So, you know, this will see the light of day in some production app soon here. soonish.
Sounds cool. I like the interface a lot. Is there an easy way to test this and test the logic?
I think well, that is, oh, thank you. I forgot. That's also the reason why this was made, because testing the logic of these things can sometimes be a little funky in how it's all combined. These functions were originally designed because of our cart mechanic. It was all kind of like bottled up inside of the inside of kind of wrapped with React's hooks and stuff like that, which you can, I forgot what the library is called, but we use it. It simulates hooks. Is it React testing library? Does that do that now? There was something, it used to be called something else before. Bill, maybe you can help me out here.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about.
I think testing library has a hooks mechanism.
Yeah. So this was designed. That's another talk that I would love to give sometime, is how to test React apps. Maybe that's a topic that we could hit in a moment. But the idea here was these methods, they are like kind of pure functions a little bit. Obviously, they might like hit a service, but you can export these out, and you could just have your you could just have this, and you put an add here, and this could be exported. Now, you do have to, if this is going to hit a server or whatnot, you do have to make it so that you can either dependency inject this or do some kind of like overwrite of what this is doing explicitly. Or you could provide your own mock add methods and build your own separate use SimpleReducer. This is a big other reason why we did it, is because these functions themselves can be tested independently, and you don't really have to go through like React testing library to be able to provide the underlying hook infrastructure to get at what you really want to test. Is if someone calls like add cart with these kind of things, is it going to make a request to the server correctly? And then is the new cart state coming out of that going to look correct? And I can test this, unit test this really, really easily, assuming you can like trap the fetch request or whatever this is making inside here, or mock that out.
Cool.
So yeah, it was designed to be very testable, like incrementally testable, easy to test this part. You could of course wrap this in a like use cart hook or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And then you could call the methods. Oh, actually I forgot. That's how I love to do it. This actually gets to like how I like testing React, is you would do a default. I always forget the syntax to make this work, especially when you're trying to make it with TypeScript. Okay. So I think it's like this is the syntax. The nice thing about this is you could do a use cart and be like, I don't want to go to the server, and I want to experiment with like what happens if add is going to return some crazy thing. Then I can overwrite add easily. The default add that actually is stateful hits the server. I can overwrite that to like, it'd be an async. Just throw barf or whatever. And now I can call add, and I can see what like the state would look like, what the error condition would look like fairly easily. This is my favorite way to test. I don't use jest dependency injection or anything like that anymore. I just make my functions take defaults that do the stateful stuff that make it very easy to overwrite anywhere else. But that's a talk for maybe another day. Has anybody else done this? Like, we're doing this like all the time lately.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of these sort of mocks, especially with custom hooks. I think it's a really effective way to test.
I do it on the component level too. Like if a component's, if like a component has like the component itself, I might even do it. So if like there's a cart component, I will, and it uses it, like in normal code looks like, you know, import use cart from XYZ or whatever. I will change, I will change that. And if it was just using, it was just doing something like this, I'll even make it so that the default, I will alias it as use cart default. And now I can create my cart component with whatever use cart hook I want. I can just totally blow away use cart. I've gotten quite crazy with this approach to avoid dependency injection to test things. But again, a talk or a topic for another day.
Well, so on something like this, when you're actually passing in the hook to use, you find that makes it difficult to debug because you only actually see the behavior at runtime?
Well, I'm not sure exactly. You don't, when you're normally on the, if you're in your main app and like your app component or something, like the cart page just looks like this, right? It's just because it's going to just use the default stateful, you know, the main use cart or whatever it is. This is, yeah, I don't know if use cart is like even the best example here, but it's just going to, whatever this component was depending on that was normally imported that you might want to overwrite because it does weird stateful things. The rest of the app just uses as a normal. It's only in your like test where you're going to be like, use cart, you know what? I want that to look like, now TypeScript complicates things because TypeScript wants that whatever you're passing as use cart to like literally be the exact same as what the default use cart looks like. But I could pass it like a function that returns an add method that is a number that returns a promise that rejects or whatever I want.
Sweet.
So this is what your test looks like. I don't, you know, use cart is so heavy with TypeScript. I might not do it with something like use cart. Instead, I would maybe I could pass like the add method all the way through, but then you get into prop drilling territory kind of thing. So it's a balance. It's not, I've just really embraced this everywhere. It's like somewhat reasonable and only do dependency injection where it's like, it's gonna be real annoying to kind of prop drill, for lack of a better term.
I think
like pass a lot of arguments.
That's cool. And it definitely makes sense for the tests. That's awesome.
Cool. Well, that's all I got. Thanks everybody. If you wanna check it out, it's UseSimpleReducer. I don't know if that was the right name for it. It's on NPM. You can find it here. Also, there's like a Bitovi, which is the company I work for, has a an article on it on like how to use it. So that's it. Thanks, folks.